Hello, it's Reviews Day Tuesday, and today I am reviewing Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi. Firstly, a note about spoilers. This review is going to have lots of them. Please do not watch this video if you have not seen Star Wars The Last Jedi. I know that generally my reviews do not have spoilers. I'm normally pretty good at being spoiler-free, but there's too much in this film that I want to talk about which involves spoilers, so unfortunately, this is going to be a spoiler-heavy one. So hopefully, if you're still here, you have seen the film. I have seen this film twice now. I saw it on Friday and I watched it again yesterday. After the first watch, I was a little ambivalent about it and a little confused in my opinions, so I wanted to see it again before I reviewed it. And I'm glad I did because it did help. I am less confused now, I think. The plot of the film is pretty simple, more simple than I was expecting it to be honest. Essentially, it's a chase through space. The First Order are chasing the Resistance, and it turns out the First Order can now track through hyperspace, which causes all sorts of problems for the Resistance, and it also causes a side plot with Finn where he and new character Rose Tico have to go and find a codebreaker so that they can disable the First Order's tracker and the Rebel fleet can get away. And also parallel to this, we follow on from The Force Awakens with Rey and Luke. Rey is trying to get Luke to return with her and help the Resistance. And also increasingly throughout the film, Rey wants to try and turn Kylo Ren away from the dark side. And the film is also about that as well. My general thought about this film is that I enjoyed it as a film. I thought it was a good film, but it maybe wasn't entirely successful as a sequel. I'm going to start with the negative things, the things that I didn't like so much about this film, and then I'm going to move on to the positive things, the things I enjoyed or appreciated or loved. This is the format we're going with, cons and then pros. It was the best structure I could come up with for this video because I have a lot of thoughts. To start with, I didn't have many predictions for this film beforehand, things which I thought were going to happen, but it turned out I did have some expectations, and I didn't know this, to be honest, until I watched the film, and the expectations that I didn't know I had weren't entirely met. In Episode 7, The Force Awakens, we are introduced to new characters, Rey, Finn and Poe, and Kylo Ren. Obviously other characters as well, but when I think about the new generation in the Star Wars films, these are the four characters that spring to my mind. And then we have Han Solo and Leia as more supporting characters in that film, and Luke doesn't appear until right at the very end. They had big roles, Han Solo especially, but it felt like a symbolic changing of the guard for me from episodes 4, 5 and 6 to episodes 7, 8 and 9. But in The Last Jedi it felt a bit to me like a step backwards, a step back towards episodes 4, 5 and 6. Of the four new characters I mentioned, I feel like Kylo Ren was a main character, and I felt like Poe's role expanded a bit, he had a bit more of an arc, but Rey and Finn felt to me a bit more like supporting characters to Luke and I guess Leia as well, and to Kylo Ren. And that felt especially odd to me since one of the themes of this film was forgetting the past, or moving on from the past, moving forward. We are what they grow beyond, or something. The Last Jedi was telling us that, but I wasn't entirely sure it was showing us that. It felt like The Force Awakens did a better job of showing us that. I may be wrong about this, I might be misunderstanding entirely. I mean, Rey's role in this film is pretty big, don't get me wrong, but to me it felt more like it was in support of Luke and Kylo Ren. It felt like those characters were getting more out of her actions than she was. And also, I guess because Rey's plot was running parallel to the main storyline, which I guess was the chase, instead of her being like in the thick of things, which isn't an unusual thing for a Star Wars film to do at all, to have a main character suddenly away from most of the other characters. But that might be partly why I'm feeling like we're not seeing the film through her eyes as we were more in The Force Awakens. It felt like the only character who we were meant to be seeing things through the eyes of was Kylo Ren. He was one of the few characters that we spent any time alone with, where we got to see them without any other characters, where we got to see them thinking. I'm thinking mainly of the scene in the lift when he was destroying the helmet. I mean, Rey had that mirror scene, but she was narrating it, and it turned out she was describing it to Kylo Ren, so that doesn't really feel like we were experiencing that with her. And Finn, I don't feel like Finn had much of an arc in this film. He had a side plot with a new character who I did love, but it didn't feel like it was entirely vital to the story, and it also wasn't really successful. I mean, he had that whole I'm going to sacrifice myself thing at the end, and he had a short confrontation with Phasma, which I liked, but apart from that he was just kind of there. And that's a shame because I feel like Finn is a fantastic character, and I don't feel like we got to explore that character very much in this film. Also, with the whole casino thing, although I did like the codebreaker, I would have quite liked it if he had actually been the codebreaker they were looking for, because they saw the actual codebreaker they were looking for and it wasn't him, right? I think I would have preferred it if they hadn't found him and then he'd been in the cell, or else that they did see him earlier and then he also got arrested and ended up in the cell, or else he was already in the cell but got bored and broke out and had some fun at the casino and then went back to his cell. Anyway, in this film I felt like there were a few roles which were more cameos than anything else. Phasma was one, also Maz Kanata, and Chewie as well. There are a lot of positives to having a simple plot, but I guess one of the negatives is that you end up with a bunch of characters with not very much to do. And the other thing which I felt made it not an entirely successful sequel, other than this slight character imbalance thing which I've been talking about for like 20 minutes, is the questions that it chose to answer from The Force Awakens and how it chose to answer them. You know, we had the question of Rey's parentage. There were a lot of theories about where she is from, and the answer we got was that they were no one, they weren't anybody important, which I like. Even if they go back on it later, I like the idea that you don't have to be part of this big dynasty to be strong with the Force. The other thing I can think of is the mystery surrounding Snoke, and that question has yet to be answered, but it may not be answered because, you know, he's dead now. Again, I really like that. It surprised me, but there was an element to this film which was a bit like when Rey gave Luke the lightsaber and he threw it over his shoulder. You spend ages leading up to a thing and then it's gone and you go somewhere else. And there's only so many times you can do that. There's only so many times you can get away with this isn't important or this doesn't matter, actually. At some point you want somebody to take the lightsaber and say, here is a really important, interesting revelation which will change how you feel about everything forever. Which might be a bit too much to ask, but I did enjoy the element of surprise that this film produced. There were many times where I had no idea what was going to happen, which is quite rare, and this film introduced a world of grey which wasn't really so evident in the Star Wars films before. You know, instead of dark side and light side and goodies and baddies, we have this sort of weird grey area, which I love. I love all my characters and all my stories to be a little bit confusing, and this film delivered that more so than any other Star Wars film has for me. And a prominent theme in this film was characters making mistakes and getting things wrong and being fallible, and I love that as a theme. And here's a thought: the first Star Wars films I watched were the original trilogy, 4, 5 and 6, but they'd already been out for years before I was born, so I already kind of knew what was going to happen. You know, they were iconic. I knew who the goodies were and the baddies. I knew that Luke and Leia were twins. I knew I Am Your Father. And the prequels, although I watched them when they came out, I again kind of knew what was going to happen because they were prequels. I knew where the characters were going to end up. It was just fun to see how they got there. Similar thing with Rogue One. I knew what was coming next. But these new films, 7, 8 and 9, are my first Star Wars films where I don't know what's coming next. And I love that, and I found more of that in The Last Jedi than I did even in The Force Awakens, even though in The Force Awakens, you know, we're introduced to a bunch of new characters. Also, speaking of new characters, I really loved Rose. I feel like she's a great addition to the Star Wars universe. There's a place in Star Wars for a character like her, I think. She has a different set of skills and she's kind of a background character who has moved into the foreground. I know I wasn't entirely a fan of her plot strand, but I was a fan of her, and I really enjoyed her sister's scene at the beginning. I really loved that scene at the beginning. As I said before, I loved that Poe had more to do. I think Oscar Isaac is great. And BB-8, I loved how prominent BB-8 was in The Last Jedi. I found the Admiral Holdo bit a little bit confusing. She could have told Poe what she was planning, I think. But I did enjoy her ending, and Hux had a far more prominent role in this film, which I enjoyed, and his relationship with Kylo Ren seems far more interesting to me now. And Kylo Ren, I find Kylo Ren / Ben Solo to be a far more interesting character now. Adam Driver put in a fantastic performance. I'm interested in this whole redemption possibility. I don't think he can be forgiven, after all he killed Han Solo, but I'm more interested in this new maskless Kylo Ren, who seems to be teetering on the edge most of the time. And I felt like the Force bond scenes, I don't know what to call them, between Kylo Ren and Rey were portrayed really simply and effectively. I really enjoyed Leia's role in this, and I felt like it was a great final performance from Carrie Fisher, and I appreciated her daughter Billie Lourd's increased role as well. And also her final scene with Luke was, I thought, a great scene. And that brings me on to Luke. I felt like Mark Hamill was really great in this film. Luke's a very different character now. A lot has happened since we last saw him, but Hamill dealt with this really well, and I enjoyed his ending where he got a bit of redemption and a bit of closure. And I really liked his scene with Yoda as well. I wasn't expecting Yoda to turn up at all. That was a big surprise to me, and I really loved how we got Puppet Yoda from the original trilogy instead of CGI Yoda from the prequels. So yeah, I feel like the performances by the whole cast were fantastic, and there were some really striking scenes which I loved, which will stay with me for a while, and they mainly came in the second half of the film. I felt like the first half or 2/3 of the film I was a little disappointed or waiting for something fantastic to happen, but the final third of the film I really enjoyed. For instance, I enjoyed the scene where Rey and Kylo Ren were battling side by side. I thought that was really well done and really well choreographed, and I loved the battle on Crate at the end with the red sand. I just felt like that was so visually interesting, and we finally got Rey and Chewie and the Millennium Falcon returning to the group. So, in conclusion, I felt like this was a film with flaws. There were some things that I didn't like about it, or that I felt didn't work entirely well with The Force Awakens before it, and I did find the humour slightly forced in places, although I did appreciate that it was there. But as a film, I thought it was really entertaining and exciting, especially towards the end, and I strongly suspect as well that it will improve with repeated views, so I'm looking forward to seeing it again when the DVD comes out. And also I'm looking forward to seeing it again after I have seen episode 9, because it's so difficult to be the middle film in a trilogy, especially in the time before the final part in the trilogy is released, because it has the least defined role, but yet so much that it has to do, and so much chance of disappointing people. I will give Star Wars The Last Jedi 3.9 out of 5. It's almost a 4, but I'm going with 3.9. I definitely didn't like it as much as Rogue One or The Force Awakens, but if I were to rank all Star Wars films, it would be in the top half. So that's my review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I would love to know your thoughts on the film. Please do signpost any spoilers though, just in case. And what do you think will happen in episode 9? I have no idea. We can talk about it and then all be wrong in 2 years. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to see how I made my Rey cosplay from The Force Awakens, then I will put a playlist below me here, and my latest video will be below me here. And if you fancy subscribing to my channel or visiting my website, then you can do so beside me here. I'll be back on Thursday with a Christmas edition of the Quiet as Mouse book club, so I hope you have a great week until then, and I will see you soon.